Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Churchill Club Chair of the Board, Mark Leahy.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mark Leahy. I am a partner at a local law firm named Fenwick & West. I'm also the chairman of the board of the Churchill Club. Our program this evening is called The Potential of Cloud Computing. We are honored to have with us Ray Ozzie, Chief Software Architect of Microsoft, and Steven Levy, Senior Writer with Wired Magazine. Thank you both for being here tonight. We have two lead sponsors for our program tonight. The first is NetApp, a leading provider of data storage, management, and protection. Thank you very much, NetApp. And our second sponsor is Microsoft, a worldwide leader in software services and solutions that help people and businesses realize their full potential. Microsoft, thank you very much. So briefly about two upcoming programs. On June 18, we will be having our annual Good Wine and Good Company program. This year it is about the wine wide web and how the net is affecting wine appreciation. 5 or 6 premium wineries will be on hand to pour. Next on Tuesday, June 23rd, it's a program about the future of security with Dave DeWalt, CEO of McAfee and others. As always, you can learn more about us if you go to the website of thechurchillclub.org, learn about our programs and membership. You can also friend us on Facebook. You can join our group on LinkedIn, and you can follow us on Twitter, and you can view our videos on YouTube and at fora.tv. Now I'm pleased to introduce our moderator. Steven is one of the most well-known and respected journalists and authors of our time. He began following and writing about technology in 1981. He worked for Newsweek for about 13 years, starting in 1995. And a year ago, he joined Wired Magazine as a full-time writer. His work has also appeared in The New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, and Premiere. Steven has written 6 books, including the critically acclaimed Hackers and Crypto, and most recently wrote The Perfect Thing, a book about the iPod. Before focusing on technology, among other things, Steven was a rock critic. He covered sports, and he found Einstein's brain, I'm told. That's right, in 1978, he literally tracked down Einstein's brain that was in the possession of a pathologist in Wichita, Kansas. Tonight, he will tap into the brain of Ray Ozzie in a conversation about cloud computing and possibly a few other things. Please welcome our guests tonight.
Well, thanks very much, Mark, and thank you, Ray, for coming up here and talking. I suspect it'll be a little easier to find your brain here. And we're going to talk, as the topic indicates, a lot about the cloud here, but I hope we'll get to a couple other items as well, and of course, when the questions come, anything goes. So the cloud is a term is being tossed around endlessly now. And one CEO who's really not given to understatement said this whole hype is total gibberish. It's a meaningless term because people use it in any way. So I'll give you the chance to clarify things. You know, when Microsoft thinks of the cloud, what does it mean? What does it talk about when we talk about the cloud?
Yeah, it is kind of tough because we in this industry tend to latch onto these things that, you know, the peer-to-peer era and things like that. I mean, what it really means to me, what differentiates it is it's a self-service, on-demand way of accessing computational resources, storage resources, things like that. You know, with a virtualized abstraction, so that that is relatively homogeneous. You know, we tend to build it on federated infrastructure so that it's out there as a public service. Many partners will do, smaller providers will do it. People will have it on premises. But the reality is it is different from the developer's perspective because you can treat it as a utility. You can treat it as a computing utility. And this is nothing new. I mean, I'm sure many people out here, but when I got into the industry, my first experience with computing was prior time-sharing service in Chicago on a teletype. It was utility computing, and IBM, with CPCMS and VM370, pioneered virtualization. These are technologies that have happened before. But right now, in essence, the pendulum is swinging back from servers that we build, routers that we program, to this computing utility networking and so on.
But it can't be the same as saying, oh, time sharing is the cloud. If anything isn't just in front of you, it has to be in some cloud somewhere. We're really talking about this connected world where information is somewhere not easily identifiable, at least to the end user. What difference is it going to make for the users of this world of cloud computing?
Yeah, and this gets into why I think we confuse it, because it can really be anything that we want to be in this era. We can start all the way at the user experience and say, how will our user experiences be transformed in a world of cloud computing? Within the enterprise, how will enterprise infrastructure such as email and document management, how will enterprise applications be transformed in a world of cloud computing? And then for developers, how do we experience it? I think it is fundamentally transformational. I think the fact that even though the paradigm kind of goes back to old, the fact that we have ubiquitous high bandwidth right now, the fact that devices are so cheap, the fact that we can get storage and computation and build these massive data centers gives us as architects the ability to imagine a solution, imagine the right kind of user experience that we're trying to do, and piece it up with the right thing delivered to the client, cached on the client, synchronized across clients, and the right piece of it in the cloud, bringing all those experiences together.
Well, before you came to Microsoft in 2005, you founded a company called Groove.
Yep.
That was a very cloudy company. The people networked and had groups, and they met somewhere where no one was.
Right.
It was out in the cloud, right?
That's right.
So you get to Microsoft, and was Microsoft sufficiently cloudy for you?
Yeah.
Did you feel you had to block the sun?
The hailstorm had passed by the time I got there. When I got to Microsoft, as you said, I had the opportunity in '97 when I left IBM to kind of return to zero. When you're fortunate and you've had a successful product, you get caught up in everything that it takes to make it successful. Ultimately, you end up doing a lot of customer work. And then I decided that I needed to get back to technology. I returned to zero, and Groove was built '97 for about 8 years till we were acquired. And it was born to the internet. And it took a contrarian approach as opposed to using web servers as the core infrastructure for how it was built. It was a purely peer-to-peer system, ultimately augmented with bot servers and enterprise integration servers and management servers and things like that. But the great thing about it was I did have a chance to kind of get into the ethos of what is the net and ultimately what is the web. By the time I got to Microsoft, respectfully, they were very busy working on things that would ultimately become Vista and Office 2007, a large part of the company. But I felt as though it was kind of like Back to the Future in many ways. There was a lot of PC thinking. The PC was still the center of how most people thought about things. And it was a little scary because by that time, I had a perspective that said there is this transformation happening. I still think the PC is amazingly relevant, but it's the connected PC. It's the PC connected to the cloud, connected to other PCs, PC connected to phones, TVs, and so on. And so I worked with Steve and Bill on a plan on change management, basically, and that's what I've been doing for 4 years.
So change management, to manage change in Microsoft to accommodate that ethos that you mentioned.
Yeah, basically, slowly but surely, in ways that you do change management in a large organization, communicating with groups, trying to help them understand not just infrastructurally what has changed in the environment, but how customers, how they want to consume the solutions that they do, the way that they themselves are transforming, and how they want to see that technology adapt to what they do. And in many ways, kind of bringing people through the transition of what it was like to develop mass market software. Microsoft is the best in the world at developing and delivering mass market packaged software and all that implies. And that model emerged at a time when we wrapped up floppy disks in boxes, submitted them into a distribution channel. They got to users. We got feedback, asynchronously through user groups and so on. Enterprises, that is still the perfect model because they don't like to consume things at a very, very rapid rate. But consumers now, it's a real-time interactive environment. You can see what every customer is doing on a real-time basis. And so managing that transition, it's been a lot of fun.
Right. Well, mass market packaged software, is that the buggy whip of our times?
No. Different market segments want to consume value in different ways. Enterprise requirements are dramatically different than requirements on the outside. And every type of software you deliver to organizations is somewhat different than things that people are used to on the net. So, for example, you can look at something like Facebook or Twitter, and these are innovations in the communications or social media realm, but they're dealing with technology and how consumers and social dynamics interplay with technology. When you throw organizational dynamics into the mix, communication tools in organizations are dramatically different because there's a chilling effect. If you say something bad in an organization, there are actually repercussions to saying something bad. Many businesses are highly regulated. Companies are accountable for the behavior of their employees. So the nature of the tools is different. You can't update systems at many, many major retailers when you're approaching the holidays. You don't want to go to professional service firms around tax season and suddenly find that the user experience has changed. Those are great customers. It's great business. We want to be sensitive to that. But we also serve consumers. We also serve individual information workers on the net. And many of the tools that people use are the same across both. And so the opportunity is to figure out how you can build software and serve those enterprise requirements while at the same time delivering perhaps a different version, a different packaging of that same value in a way that's more contemporary and embraces the internet.
But I don't want to leave that ethos remark, because it seems what you're saying, and I think I've learned a little about this when I did a profile of you last year, that almost as if there's an ethos to the cloud tied to the net, which was going to help Microsoft, in a way, change its culture and refresh itself out there by adopting those values, those cloud values, so to speak.
Yep, absolutely. And some of those cloud values are, probably what's core, what's most important is interoperability and openness of data formats. I mean, it is the lifeblood, it's the DNA of getting systems to connect with one another. Whether it's in an enterprise data center, interoperability for systems integration is extremely important. But on the net, the net has been shaped because of independent implementations of different packages and exchange of information between them, being conservative in what you produce, being liberal in what you consume. These are kinds of things that are fundamental to the organism that is the web. And coming from an era where where instead what's most important is the API as opposed to the protocol, the tools, as opposed to how they're intermixed. It is a different philosophy.
So how did you go about doing that? You arrive at Microsoft, you have this view, you have the perspective of being in the cloud, and you're arriving at this company which is busy getting some maybe belated products out the door. And how did you operate in doing that?
Well, in any large organization, whether it's in government or the military or Walmart or Microsoft, any large organization, change management is a challenge because well, I'll just jump to the end. You cannot genuinely affect change by mandate. You can't just simply say, this is the way it's going to be, and suddenly everyone snaps and is doing it. In its earlier days, when I was a partner, then a competitor with Microsoft, we always were amazed by how quickly the ship could turn. But that was a smaller era. It was a smaller company in a different era. And in essence, what I feel is the most effective is to set up the conditions to communicate what you're trying to achieve, to set up the conditions to lay out the principles of what you're trying to do, the strategic objectives, and so on. And then at the edge, at the opposite end, really start to establish conditions where people are telling stories, where you bring people in who have lived in the world that you're trying to create, and you get them to mix it up with the people who don't understand that. And there are various phases that people go through. In those early days, I wrote this memo back in late '05 that kind of laid out a big, broad picture that shook things up a little bit, and it was speaking the language that people in Microsoft understood. Bill would write a big memo. People knew what that meant. It set the pace for the next era.
That was the internet disruption.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, services disruption. And then I created a conference called SoftServe, which is software people and services people brought together and told war stories and so on.
And you actually even changed in your groups, just literally the way people work, the physical layout, didn't you?
Yeah, to the extent that I also do some incubations, some things that are a little bit riskier than the product groups might take on. I brought some of my beliefs in terms of collaboration style and how I believe startups work into the physical work environment that we did and so on. And those, that work style, those teams ended up producing the DNA of what ultimately became Live Mesh, what ultimately became Windows Azure.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second, but was that pretty easy to do? Did you get any resistance when you wanted to knock down some walls, make some open spaces and things?
Well, that's one of the things that's a privilege of being, once I was able to find a location, buildings were tough to find at the time. If I wanted to establish some kind of an objective related to a team that's in your control, this is the way Microsoft works. You do have authority and accountability to be able to do that, so long as you are doing what you are committed to do.
Well, so now let's talk about some of the things that you did manage to build. I know after a long incubation period, you've been out with some for a while, and you could talk about it there. Mm-hmm. So Windows Azure. Mm-hmm. It wasn't actually originally called that, was it? It was
called Red Dog.
Red Dog. Now, I liked Red Dog. I thought that was a great name. Why Azure? I don't know. Why change it?
The history of that code name, which I would rather not go into, was something that Dave Cutler came up with in a way that's uniquely Dave. And
so they'll have to read my article for that?
They'll have to read your, your article for that. I would rather not go into that.
Or they could tweet it right now.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it was a good code name. We were very fortunate that in the early stages of that project, what we did was we essentially said, we examined the nature of how our best consumer properties were building systems that were running I don't know, at the time, probably 200 to 400 million concurrent, active users on Hotmail and Messenger and so on. It's probably 500 million at this point. And we essentially took that services expertise and took some of our best operating systems programmers and said, if you were designing a system now for the next 30 years, what would it look like? What would client operating systems look like? What would server operating systems look like? Moving forward, did a tremendous amount of work, and then ultimately brought it back together on the server side with the server group, so there's coherence between the server strategy and management strategy and the cloud strategy, and same on the client.
And Azure was going to let people build their own Hotmails, is that right?
That's right. In essence, the nature of Windows Azure at one extreme, now I'm talking ahead of what's shipping today, but the nature of what we're building will enable people to wrap existing workloads, existing Windows Server workloads, in a way that with as little change as possible, they can move those workloads up into a cloud environment, and that could be a private cloud or a public cloud environment. And even they need some work because configuration-wise, in terms of networking, there's different latency between operating things in the cloud and on premises. But with as minimal change as possible, bringing existing workloads up. But more ideally, laying out programming design patterns and building an infrastructure so that you could say, this is what an ideal cloud program looks like. This is the way you factor the roles, the front-end roles, the mid-tier roles. This is what database looks like in the cloud. This is how you build a program with no single points of failure from day one, with elastic ability to scale from day one, and so on. And so that's in essence what Azure is.
Right. And Microsoft, of course, is going to eventually have its own cloud applications on,
yeah, that's right. That's right. When I got there, if you look at Hotmail, Messenger, and so on, each one grew up, whether because of acquisition or because of the state of the art at the time, grew up as a stovepipe. Each one had its own management systems. Each one had its own storage, cheap storage system. Each had its own ops group. In some cases, they had their own data centers. And we, in essence, said, what is the right way of reconceptualizing this so that they could all go onto a common infrastructure? Another thing is that, and we could probably talk for a long, long time, but we started basically at a much lower level. We started at the notion of what would a data center look like, from a physical perspective moving forward. And at that point, we had just transitioned from what we refer to as a Generation 1 to a Generation 2 data center, where Generation 1 is essentially you have screwdrivers and people who install OSs, and you buy PCs at the tens of PCs. Gen 2 is you're buying more standardized racks, but it's still fairly manual. Gen 3 is essentially what we're in deployment on right now, which is containerized data centers, where you build the building. You spend $300, $400, $500 million building a building, and power and cooling, and big stalls, and then as you need capacity, semi-trailers roll in with thousands of PCs at a time, and they kind of plug the water.
Literally, they're on trucks, and you just
that's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. But even in that environment, you still have to pre-invest in the land. You have to pre-invest in the power and cooling infrastructure, the building, the shell for that thing. The next generation that we're in testing and now in a few places in the world are, in essence, freestanding, completely modular data centers where every component of the data center, from the UPS, the redundant, the cooling, the power, whatever conditioning you need, are all freestanding with no roof. So all we do is prepare the property, build a security wall around it, bring the networking and power in, and negotiate the contracts for that. And then truly, we don't have to deal with a lot of pre-investment in inventory.
Right. It's somewhat of a digression, but I know at least one company big in data centers, maybe related to that, has become very interested just in the overall subject of power conservation, of green technology. Is Microsoft going down that path?
Yeah, we're right up there. We're all kind of at the same place. There's a lot of you can do it. We all do it. Different people can talk about it in different forums. You know that when, with all due respect to all of these competitors, when we're all operating at that scale, there are environmental issues, significant environmental issues. It's not just economics. And yes, we're pushing the state of the art. And one of the things that we've found that we didn't expect is that as we can only deploy Azure as fast as we can do it in the markets that the geographic territories that we're comfortable deploying them in. But ultimately, because of tax issues, because of government regulatory issues, there will be data centers in every country on Earth. There will be. And we need to partner with different companies, telcos, and so on, worldwide, to federate their cloud infrastructure with ours so that they can build things out. And what we found is that, I suppose this shouldn't have been surprising, the maturity level, even in very large companies and governments, is not very high. And we can do a service by helping bring these data center technologies that we're pioneering, and I'm sure Google is doing the same, but bringing these to partners, because it is going to be an environment.
You talk about the massive costs there, really. Mm-hmm. How many companies can really play this game and build big clouds here?
Not too many.
Yeah, you mentioned Google. There's Amazon. Maybe Yahoo.
Yeah, I don't know about Amazon. Amazon they are the leader. They've done amazing work. But the level to which you need to build this out to serve at least enterprise deployments, it's substantial. It's very substantial. And you have to understand, Microsoft is building this infrastructure for ourselves because we have so many companies out there using Exchange, using SharePoint. There are a line of companies who want to get into this infrastructure because we can save them a lot of money doing it. So we're doing it for ourselves, doing it for Hotmail, doing it for MSN, and doing it for their apps. So it's a big investment.
So it's going to be limited to the companies that, as a consequence of their core business, need to build these big data centers.
I think that will be the primary. Those will be the primary drivers. It's a very odd situation in that in many ways the consumer technologies are what drive you to have the self-motivation to do it, and it's actually what drove our competencies in-house. Had we not kept MSN alive and invested in MSN since '95, since the AOL, Yahoo era, we wouldn't have had those competencies in-house, and those competencies wouldn't be there to benefit the enterprise. Now, all of that is benefiting a much.
So it's sort of like a stealth ROI in terms of the Microsoft.
Exactly.
So, if I'm a customer looking to build one of these big cloud services, mm-hmm. Looking at the time when you roll it out, what's your competitive edge? What will you tell me to build with us on our platform as opposed to one of the other ones?
I think we really have. I guess I would say we have 5, primary advantages that give me confidence. Number one, I started to talk about it in the data center stuff, but it's technology. Our ability to invest helped, but we also have MSR. MSR has been doing a lot of the technology. Microsoft Research has been doing a lot of the technology in terms of understanding different cooling mechanisms, just simply driving it from the atom on up. That investment has been tremendous. The fact that we have operating system technology and skills has helped a lot in terms of getting this stuff up and running. The fact that we had storage investments because of search In essence, we had a big, storage. Search requires a tremendous amount of storage across tens of thousands of computers, and that is the storage system upon which Windows Azure's storage system was built. So by the time it was born, it had already been, well proven out over many generations of that product. So from a technology, I'm pretty confident that we have a developer edge, I believe. Now, I don't, time will tell whether this is true or not, but, between 5 and 7 million, developers are actively working to the Microsoft stack in one way, shape, or form. And today, those are the people who are, who are more or less the market opportunity for us. The reality is that the market opportunity is broader than that because just like Windows, where on Windows there are a lot of great open source projects and packages, and people use it as the basis, not just Linux. They deploy those on Windows servers. We actually have the opportunity here to have a business opportunity relative to those developers, because if we can prove to them that we have a great infrastructure for their software, they're pretty pragmatic and they'll deploy it. That's developers. On the partner side, 90 to 95% of Microsoft's revenue comes through partners. That's just across all of Microsoft. We understand partnering. We understand the notion that we are part of a value chain, and that it's really good if you set up an ecosystem such that lots of different parties make money. And as I said, I think in the cloud realm, there are going to be lots and lots of opportunities for partners to make money, even hardware partners, where on the container side, we're essentially raising the state of the art so that you'll be able to go and buy a container from various vendors because we're trying to drive them into standardization at that level. And the final two are really enterprise advantage and consumer. The consumer advantage I talked about, the fact that we, unlike some of our enterprise competitors, had that consumer asset. So if an enterprise competitor wanted to get into the cloud game and they don't have that competency, it's going to be hard for them to get there. And on the enterprise side, we have, I'm not sure how many people realize this, but 86% of all enterprises, all companies of any size, even mid-size and up, run Active Directory. And that means their users are provisioned in Active Directory. It's one button press to federate those to the cloud. And so suddenly you've got a world of addressable market for developers to have one button provisioning of those users within enterprises. So I think that, plus the fact that Exchange and SharePoint are good applications. Most enterprises won't jump right in at the EC2 Azure level. They're going to come in saying, how can I save money? And today, the best way to save money for an enterprise, especially in this economy, is to take things like document management and email infrastructure or communications and just have somebody else manage that for them.
How big a revenue opportunity is this for Microsoft? Is it going to deliver profits the same way that the previous successful businesses have?
It's a huge revenue opportunity. The margins on services are not what the margins on software are, so it will increase our profit, it will increase our revenue, but you won't have that margin on the rest of it. I should say, though, that from a taxonomy perspective, even though the margins at the low level, at the Azure EC2 level, are going to be lower, at the top level, where you're delivering a solution or something like Exchange, you're pricing those based on business value more than costs, and so the margins are still very, very good.
But you have a competitor that's very driven to charge low prices, maybe in some cases free.
Yes, they are, and we have, competition is great. We look forward to competition in that realm. We're not competing with them in that area right now. We're competing more with Amazon, VMware,
So to tie up this part of it, when is all this become available to everyone?
Well, the low levels are available in a kind of a beta. We call it a community technology preview form. We'll be going commercial soon on those low levels. But what excites me, frankly, more is what's happening at the high level in these services that we call online, the Exchange services. The momentum is tremendous. a year and a half ago, when we started talking about this with customers, with integrators and partners, they didn't really understand why they wanted to do this. Now these integrators are building practices around this. You have partners out there and our own sales force knocking on people's doors saying, how can we save you money? Here is a way that we can save you money. We'll make money. You'll spend, it'll cost you less, and it's good all around.
So the second part of the things, the mesh technologies there. Explain that.
Well, everything that we've been talking about really is more or less the back-end side of what cloud computing looks like. What really turns me on, because I'm kind of genetically, even though I did systems early in my career, once you ship a mass market app, it's kind of addictive. You like and the thing that excites me is the transformation that's happening at the user experience level and how we consume devices. I mean, we're moving to a world where we have so many different types of devices and number of devices in our lives. And stated kind of abstractly, but probably most coherently, if you were designing an OS today for the experiences that need to be delivered today, you'd design it differently. You would have the cloud at the center. Everything is all connecting to the cloud. And you would use those devices in rich ways that were appropriate to that device, but leverage that connection to the cloud and to the other devices. So you would be, it would be very easy to buy a 6-pack of netbooks at the holiday season and give them to the kids, because you'd know that all you have to do is drop it on your desk or on the table, log in, and all the apps are cached. All the data is synced. There's no reason why code that comes to the client, any kind of code, whether it's assembly language wrapped up in an exe or whatever, it should all be cached like JavaScript is cached. It should all be sandboxed like the browser sandbox. Data should be synchronized. The web isn't there yet on that, but in terms of technology to enhance the web and bring it in that direction, that's the opportunity. And I think the world.
Wait, isn't that almost like what you're describing? It sounds almost like a nightmare for Microsoft, because it goes against the desktop apps and
look,
the existing
as long as I've been
operating
in this industry, everybody who's got some new technology touts it as being the thing that's going to kill the previous thing. And when it all settles out, it's the previous thing and the new thing, and we do more of it. And the reality is we'll always need an OS. Every device needs an OS, and the OS that abstracts the hardware and has the best experience is going to be a great OS for that device. But the programming model on top of that OS is what's changing, and the experiences on top of that OS is what's changing. And all we have to do is make sure that the way that we approach the programming model is contemporary and relevant for developers at that moment in time. And yes, that's got to factor in the web at the center, because that's what people do. And there are ways to connect the web for web developers with what's going on in the OS in ways that haven't even been tried today. I mean, there's no reason that experiences in the browser have to be locked into the browser. If you look at things like the iPhone or many other things, yes, it can talk to the accelerometer. It can talk to this device, that device. I think the real questions that people should ask are, well, if you were a web developer, what might you want to do with Office? What might you want to do with the shell? There are things ways of lighting up the browser experience and the OS experience holistically that are much more compelling than what we have today. And I'm not concerned about there being a future for.
That's interesting, because a lot of people probably feel that Microsoft has not embraced the netbook movement there. And you seem excited by it.
I don't know what the stat is, 86% or something like that, of netbooks. I mean, I don't know how much we have to do to embrace it. Yes, we have to probably write an OS other than XP that runs on it, and we've done that with Windows 7. But I mean, the reality is, look, I don't know what a netbook is. A netbook is is evolving into an inexpensive appliance-like PC. It's a laptop. And is there going to be a netbook that does something that has a value proposition that's different than a laptop? I don't know. It might actually happen. I don't know. But the way it is right now, people are buying them as inexpensive laptops. And the more laptops there are out there, the happier I am. There's more opportunity for us to sell applications. Right. There's more opportunity for us to sell operating systems. Yes, there are pricing differences and things like that. But we just think of the larger addressable market worldwide. In our industry, we've tended to kind of, with all due respect to a really big place, we think of India differently. We all talk about India is not really a PC market. India is a phone market. It'll never be a PC market. Well, once you reach certain price points, India becomes a PC market. And there's suddenly a lot more opportunity. So, I'm very optimistic.
One more, we're getting close to the question time, actually, but one more question about the netbook related. To what degree does Microsoft's productivity apps become totally cloud-based?
I don't think it's, well, they're total.
Or become cloud-based.
Yeah, they'll be totally cloud-based in the realm, actually, let me back up. There's kind of a, in order to get things going across the company, you need memes. You need to say things and say them again, say them again. So we say 3 screens in a cloud, 3 screens in a cloud, 3 screens in a cloud throughout our company. And what that means is everything we deliver from a user experience perspective will have some aspect of its value delivered across the PC class of device, the phone class of device, and the TV class of device. Every one of them will have something, and all will be connected to the cloud. That's what will bring them all together. The Office experience it's not software for a PC. It's productivity. People are paying for productivity. So every person, when they buy Office, will be doing editing and looking at big stuff on big desktop screens because that's what it's good for. That's what the PC, nothing will ever beat the PC in terms of hitting page down, or the down arrow on a big spreadsheet, and scrolling around. It's just so fast and so compelling. And so that's how it should be delivered. Yes, the app should be cached. It should be delivered from the cloud. But its native code for the PC is great. But people, all the world's people, don't come together on the PC. They come together on the web. And we do a lot of sharing. You don't create documents for yourself very often. You create them as part of larger things. So the sharing scenarios, the collaboration scenarios, are homed, rooted on the web. And then there are phone scenarios. Everything that we do, you go to meetings and productivity, you don't always take your laptop, but you probably always carry your phone with you. The phone has your location. The phone has a recorder. The phone has a little thing that you can take a picture of what's on the whiteboard. The phone is an amazing companion to the Office scenarios. So 100% of Office will be cloud, 100% will be mobile, 100% will be PC.
Okay, before I'll take your questions, there's a couple other quick non-cloud questions. It's been about a year since your predecessor as chief software architect.
That's right.
Left the company from a full-time basis there. What's been the effect of that for you and for the company?
Reviews are conducted a little differently.
That's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
Yeah, it's true. Bill, even though he is physically not there, is there. Bill will always be there. Bill.
Does he write? Does he call?
He writes, he calls, but infrequently, and on things that he's interested in. He's engaged in the things he wants to. Everyone knows he's just a bilgy away. He's there, but he knows that he's not accountable for our success anymore. Therefore, he knows not to give orders or directives or influence things that would blow the accountability of being able to deliver something and the accountabilities you have to have in a big company. In essence, every company is shaped by its founders. Bill brought to the company a sense of a culture of crisis that any day now, 2 guys in a garage are going to be there to take down the company. that is, you know, that culture is very.
Was he right?
Well, yeah, he's right.
Yeah.
No, he's right. Yeah. And so that culture and the fact that the company has been through competitive battle after competitive battle after competitive battle, you know, builds a very. It's a very healthy culture in, you know, in that realm, and that's why when new things come along, you know, people don't get freaked out by it. They think about it. They do what they believe to be the right thing.
Have you figured out what to do about Think Week post-build? Do you have your own Think Week?
Yeah, Think Week was it was conceptually a very Bill unique thing. In that Bill, for those of you who don't know, Bill would you know, kind of open it up to the company to write papers and to give him input. Bill has an amazing ability to consume very, very quickly. So 1,000 something papers would come in for each Think Week, which was held, I think, 3 times a year. He would go off to a cabin, you know, and sequester himself, and his staff helped prioritize, and he would probably read a couple hundred of them and give feedback in some way, shape, or form. And this is just like a wake up, go to sleep, wake up, you know. Yeah. And people loved it. People loved getting Bill's input, and Bill would hand it out and give a bunch of people, you know, send it to a bunch of people who also commented on it. I don't think that's something that we want to reproduce. You know, it was a great thing, but it really gave a lot back to the culture, and people like feedback, senior technical feedback, and visibility. And so it's reshaped, but it's essentially the same thing, but it's a broader senior set of technical individuals who is giving feedback in a more, you know, in slightly different way. So we'll see how it pans out.
Uh-huh. And finally, you know, again, before questions, I do want to mention, it's in your bio here, and I wrote about it. And you mentioned it once, PLATO.
Yep.
You know, one thing that I found fascinating when I wrote about you was how influenced you were by this system that you came across when you were an undergraduate in college there. Mm-hmm. Can you tell just a little bit about what that was, what it meant for you, and the effect it still might have on your thinking?
Yeah, I will. How many of you, I'm just really curious, how many of you would say you know much about PLATO from that era? Yeah. It's kind of a tragedy that the Bay Area culture, given that this is the center of the universe, doesn't have as much of an appreciation for the contributions that system had at its time. I hope at some point we can do something at the Computer Museum or something to kind of showcase this. It's live. It's on the net today. It's cyber1.org. You can log into it. So this is it was the late 60s when it began. I was exposed to it in the mid-70s as a systems programmer on it. A gentleman by the name of Don Bitzer, I'll say creative eccentric, really bright guy, but he's a solution-focused guy, and he deeply believed that education was in trouble in this country, and that there was potential in utilizing technology in teaching, in new ways of teaching, and new ways of education. So he created this thing, PLATO, Programmed Logic for Automated Teaching Operations, and just said, we're going to build everything that we need to make the most compelling thing at the time. And the way I was exposed to it was, I was at University of Illinois. I was literally, you know, punching cards and submitting them to the 360. And directly across the street, there was this building that had this orange glow coming out of the windows. And what they were Don Bitzer and his team invented the plasma panel. Do you remember what the plasma panel is? It's on your TVs, a lot of TVs. But he invented it because he wanted graphics terminals. And graphics terminals need memory to display what's on the screen. And there were storage tubes at the time, but plasma panels have memory per dot. So they invented plasma panels so they could have a terminal that had a persistent image on it. That terminal had, you know, a microfiche projector, displayed multimedia onto the back of it. It had an audio-video device with, you know, headphones. And the user, it was a centralized mainframe, 1,000 terminals, 500 at U of I, 500 in pockets worldwide, big network, big systems thinking, and students would use it in educational settings. But from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. was non-prime time, and the authors of lessons and we as systems programmers got a chance to play with it. And what people built were instant messaging, character at a time instant messaging, group chats, online gaming. Some of you might remember, well, all of the air simulations and things like that. Flight sim came from that heritage. There were online discussions called group notes. There was email. It was called personal notes, Lotus notes, Unix notes. All of these things were derived from that. And it was online community. It was we who were fortunate enough to be exposed to it at the time understood what it was like to have people who had relationships with people across the world or across the country that they never saw. You got to understand what flamers were like, this, that, and the other. And this is where I began to gain an appreciation for collaboration, because I worked on projects with people that I didn't see face-to-face, programming projects.
And I think that's shaped your career then, and now you're building that at Microsoft.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lay.
Yeah, thanks.
And I imagine we'll have some questions. I think what's going to happen is the people with the microphones will find you.
I thank you very much for very interesting observations. My name's Carl Hewitt. I'm at MIT and Stanford. It seems to me that one of the big things that's happening now with this cloud thing is that our computer systems are going to have to get to be a lot better at dealing with inconsistency, because you just can't keep it all consistent. Our old relational database where we had these magic properties supposed to keep it consistent just aren't going to work. And you think about what kind of tool that we have. We can take mathematical logic. But if you use mathematical logic of a single inconsistency, you get to conclude that the moon is made of green cheese and anything else you want.
And the question?
So the question is, what is Microsoft doing to help us out of this inconsistency trough that we're diving into?
I'll just say that, to try to keep it short, that as an industry, we have every successful product ends up growing and growing and becoming very, very, very complex. And we mask that complexity with APIs historically in the past, whether user experiences or APIs. But ultimately, things get more and more complex. We talked earlier about the ethos of the web, and I think one of the things that is affecting a lot of what we do and should be taken seriously, I believe, industry-wide, is essentially when we are architecting systems, distilling them down to their simplest possible components and understanding the protocol interactions between those components. Because building complex systems, even though we're all smart and we can all do it because we can keep it all in our heads, it ends up with fragile systems and non-scalable systems and non-interoperable systems. And so that is, I would say that's very, very core. In terms of the database world, you've got to deal with both. You've got to basically deal with, consistent systems for those applications, and you've got to, denormalize, and you've got to basically do, you've got to do so many of the things you were taught not to do in order to get things working on the web. So, and you've got to embrace both. You've just got to.
Hello, my name is Claire Baldwin, and I work for Reuters News in San Francisco. My question is, you've been talking a lot about the cloud and about netbooks tonight, and it's very clear that netbooks are a booming category. Shipments are set to double this year and hit about 21 million units. And you guys have been very successful in getting your operating system onto netbooks. But I believe yesterday at the Computex show in Taiwan, you announced that the MS7 operating system wouldn't run on ARM-based netbooks. And it seems like that's going to be the next big trend. I'm curious about that decision and what went into it.
I don't know what the next big trend will be. As I said, the netbook, as consumers have spoken for it, is a laptop. They buy it, and for the most part, even though it's positioned as a browser device for the web, people expect Office to operate on it. They expect to be able to go to download.com or download this, download that, just because that's what people do. And I have some degree of confidence that that will still continue to occur. ARM-based netbooks, unless that ARM processor is running a virtual PC emulator, it's not going to run the world's PC software. So it will not be a laptop. It will be, if it happens, and it happens in volume, it will be a different type of device. And there has yet to be a broadly accepted clamshell keyboard device that is not a PC. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not writing it off, but I'm investing in the future of lots and lots and lots of really nice, expensive, and really nice, inexpensive laptops. Is it technically possible to run Windows on other processor architectures? Yeah. We used to run it on MIPS. It's run in various. It's written the right way to be able to run on different architectures. But that, then you're into emulation technologies so that you can support other, using virtualization stuff to support third-party programs that are written to the Intel instruction set. So, all I can say is I believe the x86 instruction set and, Intel AMD based netbooks and laptops are just they're going to be the majority of what's out there. Over there.
My name is Atul Salgakar, and I work in the healthcare setting with electronic health records and medical records. I worry as an architect about the bloat in the system, whether this cloud computing is going to increase fast products rather than good products. And in particular, I see that cloud computing has tremendous potential in, say, rural health, where it can address very important problems, but I still don't see the confidence of having patient records and things stored in the cloud when a doctor needs to access and transact on those. Do you have a sense when our medical records, our family's medical records would be cloud-based?
Well, it's technically doable. It's just whether, from a legal and regulatory standpoint on one hand, and from a consumer trust perspective on the other hand, this is a world that we're ready to go to. I think everyone knows that ultimately, whether it's in our lifetime or someone else's lifetime, it's bound to happen. I mean, when you look at the stacks of information. But old habits die hard. People love local for doctors, and I think it's going to be, it's going to take a while. I mean, we're significantly investing in Health Vault. We're betting on that this will happen. Our approach is, in essence, to use carrot rather than stick, to say, if you exercise, if you do this, if you do that, you might want to buy some little devices. Those devices might connect to your phone or to a PC. Those things will connect to the cloud. We will provide a safe record storage facility for that. We will have these third-party organizations validate our practices. We will be working with policymakers, to show that this is not just a pipe dream, that it's actually possible. But it's going to take a while. And I think honestly, we have to figure out a way as an industry to move all together in the right direction. Early on, there was, as Steven well knows, there was a crypto export issue that we had as an industry, and we got together through the Business Software Alliance, and we spoke with one voice, and that really helped. I mean, it took a long time, but it at least helped when we were talking to policymakers about these issues. I think we can do ourselves a favor as an industry to do the same.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Donna Schaefer, a professor at Marymount University, and I'm wondering, how does cloud computing change the curriculum that I need to be teaching?
I'm sorry, in which area, what do you teach? I'm sorry, in computing. Well, I would say that there are going to be a new set of design patterns and frameworks for parallel cloud-based computing. When you're building the back-end workloads, you are going to factor your program in markedly different ways than we have in the past. We've talked on the client and in scientific computing about parallelism for ages. And even though we're getting multi-core, many-core on the PC, we still haven't nailed good, easy to understand programming methodologies to crack open the use of that thing. I think it's markedly different in the cloud. I think the cloud, in terms of, because people already are beginning to factor front ends, mid-tier, back ends, they're designing, because of the web, they're using model view controller mechanisms and structuring, componentization to factor away the UI. I think it's going to be much easier to bring the world of computing into parallel programming frameworks in the cloud. But we're nowhere in terms of developing that. This is an academic research area that is just, it will be so fruitful. Ultimately, I've said this before, but ultimately I think that cloud computing will not take off until all of us as vendors, whether it's Amazon, us, when Google gets lower in the stack, as I assume they will, unless we all have the same paradigm. You can think of it as the lamp or WAMP or WIMP. That stack is something people are used to in a server environment. Unless we as an industry figure out what that model is across all of our cloud services, it's going to hurt us all. So, we've just got to do that. Yeah.
Okay, wait, the person with the microphone there. Who's got there?
Hi, Paul Krill from Infoworld.com. What are Microsoft's plans regarding support of HTML5 and Internet Explorer?
I have no announcements to make at this time. However, I will say that it is our commitment to be a world-class web browser, what our competitors like to call a modern web browser. So I think you can expect us to do the right thing.
I think you may have already answered this question. I'm Roger Bamford. I'm at Oracle Corporation. Microsoft has had a history of dominance with its proprietary stack. But in the case of cloud computing, there are significant competitors. Do you think you'll be able to shake the monopoly culture of the company in order to succeed in this market?
Yeah, right.
Am I still beating my wife? Is it true? I believe we are, I said before, I believe when you look at the assets that we've got, that we have a lot to bring to the table. I believe that in the enterprise world, there is a certain level of confidence. We have clawed our way up to what some people would say having some enterprise credibility now. And it's hard to get to that point, and I believe that we will be able to make the cloud really useful for enterprises very, very quickly. We have a lot to do to prove to people who are doing web startups that we are a credible alternative, and that's an uphill battle, of course, but I am committed absolutely to doing that. Judge us by what we build and what we do, not what we say or what we did. That's all I can say. Okay.
Hi, my name is David Onjaic with Sonoa Systems. Everybody here has been following trends like cloud computing and netbooks and mobile and other things. Is there a technology trend that maybe is not very well covered that you're personally interested in and you're following?
Well, I kind of have a history in communication and collaboration software. So when I am commuting or on a long international trip, where my mind always goes is how can we really, really use technology to decrease the friction, to increase the productivity, to be like the superconductor between our minds when we are apart, when we need to work on a project together. That's where I always go. And I think that when I started working on notes back in '84, Irene Greif had just started, she kind of coined the research area of computer-supported cooperative work. Tom Malone had been working on transaction cost economics. That was kind of like the early part of that era. We haven't even scratched the surface. This is going to be, whether it's economics or other reasons, it was SARS, then swine flu. There will be lots of reasons why travel is always going to be a pain, and maybe it'll be even more of a pain. And technology is just getting better and better and better. And I don't think we've scratched the surface in terms of how we can effectively connect our minds in the projects and things that we need to work on that are very high value. I mean, every business does something of high value with people outside their own walls. So.
Hi, my name is Sridhar, and I'm with LightNet. My question to you was, what do you think about the notion of private and public clouds? There's been a lot of debate about that. Is there such a thing as a private cloud?
Yeah, I honestly don't know what the debate is because it's just software. You can run it here or you can run it there. So yes, there is a public cloud, but if you package it in a certain way and federate it in a certain way, you can even give a developer experience, and this is the path that we're on, where a developer can use whatever tool they want, Visual Studio, Eclipse, you name it, to write your software, submit it into the cloud. It might run, if you're in an enterprise, it might run on, the IT may have configured it to run this percentage of it on the internal containers that are sitting in their parking lot, and to flow workload out to our cloud or a partner's cloud. This is just going to happen. It's all the same technology, and so there is no real difference between private and public. There are issues that we've worked through, that we continue to work through, of, I'll just give you specific examples. We've got this monstrous data center in Chicago that has all these bays that are waiting for containers. Those containers might have an enterprise-owned container. An enterprise-owned container might be sitting on our premises. One of our containers might be sitting on an enterprise's parking lot. An enterprise might own the one that's in their parking lot. All of these configurations will happen. And so we just have to get on with it, talk with one voice to customers about the benefits of this new model, start figuring out what the common programming models are, and the world will shift. There will be a time, I swear to you, you tell me, is it going to be 10 years or 5 years or 15, where we all sit around and go, God, I remember we used to actually program routers. We used to actually put blades into racks. We won't think that way anymore. It's because it will shift. And it'll happen, it'll shift in enterprise, in government, everywhere.
Yes, Richard Waters, Financial Times. Since you care so much about collaboration, tell us what you think about Google Wave. Isn't that the thing that you always dreamt of building at Lotus and Groove? And you have to be honest now.
Let me just start by saying I have nothing but the most high degree of sincere respect for the people who took this on, because I love it when people think big, think, how can I solve these big problems and move things forward? I love that. And they took on a problem that has a lot of architectural ramifications, social ramifications. There's just a lot of things that they had to solve. And what I've seen of it, it's nice. But let me just come back to, again, this broken record of the ethos of the web. I think it's kind of anti-web. It violates one principle that I just hold so true right now, which is complexity is the enemy in the ethos of the web. If you have something that, by its very nature, by the way it's architected, is very complex with many roles and the way you configure it and how this has to connect with that, then you need open source to have many instances of it, because no one will be able to do an independent implementation of it. Just by the nature of how complex it is, no one will be able to do an independent implementation. And fundamental to the web are decomposing things to be simple enough where you don't need open source. You might want open source, you might want proprietary, but you've got to have independent implementations. What's key to the ethos of the web is open data formats, open protocols, open data formats, no opaque packages and payloads being tunneled across from one thing to another. It's just kind of simple and out there. So when you look at Live Mesh, I don't know how many people have looked at that, that took a lot of the concepts from Groove. Groove and Wave are basically the same thing if you look at them. They use different sync protocols. You know, they have a model that has that relies on servers to coordinate things. Ours was, masterless. But we all had bot servers. We all do deltas. We all do sync. It's the same basic thing. But the nature of Mesh was learning from Groove and saying, OK, if you're going to do synchronization, if you're going to do this and that, how can we distill it down to simple things that people could do independent implementations of? So it's all based on RSS, based on this and that. And it's not going to do all the things that Wave does or that Groove did. But it's more in the spirit of something that can sustain for long, long periods to come. I hope we learn a lot as an industry from Wave. I really do. I mean, we're going to learn a lot about whether users want to think about a holistic experience versus liking email, separation from IM, separation from workspaces. We'll learn a lot. We learned a lot in Notes. We learned a lot, Eric Hahn learned a lot with Collabora. Everybody who tries to go into this space learns a lot, and we all benefit from it. And we'll learn a lot from their technology. And they will help the browser evolve and so on. But as a system, I think the complexity is an issue, and they had no choice, because the problem that they took on, the way they defined it, is an inherently complex problem.
Okay.
Hi, Ricardo Antuna with Wise Technology. As you continue to manage change and assemble all the building blocks for a perfect Microsoft Cloud, what can your customers, enterprise and consumers, expect with regards to licensing, operating systems, and applications?
I think some of our systems will go to a consumption model. Some will stay the way they are. The challenge that we've taken on is we believe in an end game where enterprises in particular have choice of running things on premises or running things off premises. And we believe in a holistic licensing model so that they don't have to really think hard, so that it's an IT deployment decision as to whether they want to balance workload here or there. They don't want to have to, we don't want them to have to think, oh, do I provision 10 more mailboxes here because I'll do some game theory and optimize the pricing or whatever. So we've redone our pricing models so that we can offer productivity or email or something like that to a customer and say, have it your way. Start with 10 seats, move it to 70,000. It doesn't matter to us, just it flows. So that's a high order bit for us, a lot. But at the low level, we will have database as a service, storage as a service, computation as a service, consumption model, transaction, whether transactions or bandwidth, it's what you'd expect at those lower levels.
Where are we next? Okay.
Hi, I'm Nick Kalyani with .NET Nuke, one of the largest web open source projects on the Microsoft stack. Do you envision there will ever be a time when we can go to any cloud-connected device and find our work environment there in seconds, our applications, data, everything ready to use?
The answer is yes for that class of device. The reason I say 3 screens in a cloud is I believe that there are different experiences for different device classes. And so we've arbitrarily picked 3 device classes. So yes, I believe that you will be able to buy a PC and not worry about whether this PC is going to die or not. You can buy a PC and the stuff that should be there will be there. I think that phones are already further along in terms of their appliance-like nature. I don't know how many of you used danger devices, with the Sidekick early on, but that's probably the archetype of an appliance-like model where you could just drop it in the water and go buy another one, and it just all comes back exactly the way that it should. And we'll get there with TVs. I mean, TVs, we're all excited about phones right now, but TV is the next phone. So the same will happen there.
Well, 2 more questions, I think. Go ahead.
What is, Joseph Gilor, what is your vision for information security with so many devices distributed from one side and the cloud and the complex situation in this era?
Yeah. Security, I don't have a simple answer to that. It's never been more important. The world that I just described requires you to be able to wipe devices because you lose them. We have the problem with many security problems with devices that are related to the software that's installed that doesn't have uniform security practices. Let's just say it that way. I mean, one of the beauties of the PC is that people can have the freedom and empowerment to install what they want, but that freedom brings with it a lot of danger. We will be helping that along by using virtualization technology more and more to isolate the risk and turn the PC more into an environment that we get used to on the web. However, this is also an area of data that relates to data centers, and we're only basically scratching the surface in data centers. Just to give you a sense of this, we have to develop a palette of threat models for the physical machines that are deployed wherever in the world. And if we want people to use cloud computing, we have to know that they're confident that people in this whole supply chain of all the people who fix the broken PCs, the people who operate them on site, the people who have access to the physical wires after they've been decrypted off the public net, that all of this stuff is well understood in a way that we can communicate a sense of trust to customers. I mean, we're getting to the point in our own architecture, for example, where you drop a container, treat a container like a lost phone, where we can suddenly turn a whole container into a useless piece of hardware upon command from a central source. There's just so many areas where we need to use crypto and key management in very creative ways moving forward. So sorry I can't give you a simple answer. It's just a very complicated thing.
Okay, and our final question, where is that? Over here.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I'm with Citrix Systems. My question is also about security, but it's not about cloud security. It's more about access to the cloud. So when you have a clouds now, there is a problem with the federation and the communication between two clouds. How do you get to the cloud? So my question is, do you see Microsoft playing instrumental role in that, or do you see actually providers taking care of that set of problems?
I'm sorry, what role specifically?
Which is mainly access to the cloud, secure access to the cloud.
Each vendor will use their own technologies to define a secure cloud and a secure federation between a cloud and a customer. So for example, in our case, I don't know how many of you are familiar with direct access technology. It's probably my favorite feature of Win 7. I mean, it's an amazing technology. It's a VPN-less, secure way for people who walk around with their laptops to be on their corporate networks from the inside all the time. It's just a great technology. We'll use that in our cloud to make sure that the cloud workloads appear to the enterprise vendor as part of the secure enterprise data center network. That's how we will solve that problem. I don't know how other people will solve that problem, VLANs or this or that. I don't have an answer today. I'm not sure if this is where you were going. We will solve it for our cloud and for our partners who will federate with our cloud. So, a telecom partner or somebody else who has a data center that wants to be part of the Azure fabric. I don't know how Amazon and Microsoft and Google and whoever else will securely connect our clouds. I think at that point, my current model is just simply, it's through open interoperable standards, but it's not going to be as seamless to manage as within a provider.
I have one more question I'll ask myself. You've mentioned the phones many times as one of the three big screens there. What's Microsoft's plan in that area? Certainly you won't be talking mainly about the iPhone a year from now, right?
I'm not going to talk about dates, and I'm not going to talk about function. Windows Mobile is our bet. We have refreshed Windows Mobile to be Windows Mobile 6.5, which has a number of new features that let people who make phones do a lot more interesting things with them. It's a very competitive market.
Well, we've just seen that a new player can make a splash. Can't
look, all I can say is this. Everybody's got to figure out what their differentiation is. The one thing I'm concentrating on, I know that all phones are going to have touch. All phones are going to have media players. All phones are going to have app stores. It's going to, after a while, we'll start yawning. It's just, that's going to be the way it is. And so then you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do differently? At this point in time, I'll just tell you where my strategic focus is. Where my absolute strategic focus is, not on phone, not on PC, not on Xbox, not on all of them. It's 3 screens in a cloud. It's how do they all come together in seamless experiences that just work for users in things that they care about. Is it going to be absolutely stellar, top-notch in each and every dimension? Of course not. But strategically, I think the value of having these holistic, seamless experiences is going to be appreciated by the people who use them.
Ray, I think you've not only given us a great sense of 3 screens in a cloud, but of your passion that you bring to everything there.
Thanks.
I want everyone to give a very big hand.
Thanks a lot, Steven.
Ray and Steven, thank you very much. We appreciate your free discussion about what's on your mind and your thoughts and your willingness to share 3 screens in a cloud and otherwise. As a small gesture of thanks, we're going to hand to you some Churchill Club T-shirts for you to wear.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank once again NetApp and Microsoft for being sponsors tonight, and thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you at future events. Good night.